You ever get that sense when you wake up on a Monday morning and something just isn't right? That was me last week. I sat at my desk in the translation department, sipping tepid coffee from my chipped Queen of Syntax mug, watching the seconds crawl by as the morning dragged on. The entire floor carried this strange hum, like anticipation tangled with dread. It all began 3 weeks ago when the company announced we were getting a new CEO. I didn't think much of it at first. Grace in manufacturing was no stranger to leadership changes, but the moment Marcus Bell stepped through the glass doors, I knew something was different, and not in a good way. The man was late to his own introduction meeting. No, seriously. He showed up 15 minutes after everyone had already awkwardly applauded through the board chair's opening remarks. He sauntered in like he owned the place, which technically he did now, reeking of expensive cologne and something else. It wasn't obvious, but I have a sharp nose for these things. There was a hint of alcohol in the air, not a last night glass of wine smell, more like poorly hidden liquid courage. He didn't smile much. Not sincerely anyway. His face was all boardroom edges and practiced smirks, the kind of man who tossed around phrases like synergize global directionality and believed it meant something. On day 2, he tried to restructure the International Accounts Division only to realize he didn't even know which markets we served. He called our South Korea liaison the guy from Singapore, right in front of the entire department. Cringe doesn't even come close, but it wasn't just the ignorance, it was the attitude. The man treated meetings like nuisances and people like obsolete office supplies. He didn't ask questions. He made decisions, usually terrible ones. And here I was, Mary Cooper. 17 years with the company. My job was simple on paper. I handled translations for our global clients, especially high-stakes presentations and contracts. In practice, I was a human bridge. I spoke 5 languages fluently and could read nuance the way most people read spreadsheets. I'd helped close deals that funded entire departments. But lately, I felt invisible. Marcus never met my eyes. He never asked what I did. Never sat in on a single foreign client meeting. At our last monthly roundtable, he cut my update short to ask the marketing director about font selections. I should have known then that something was forming. Something about Marcus's tone, his clipped responses, and his sudden fixation on streamlining resources sent a chill through me. I'd seen this before. Executives with polished resumes and no real understanding of the trenches sweeping in with cost-cutting brooms. But you can't measure trust or cultural sensitivity on a spreadsheet. You can't replace years of relationship building with Google Translate. Still, I kept my head down, kept doing the work. Maybe part of me believed that if I stayed professional, it would all pass. I didn't know then that the storm was about to break, and I had no idea just how far Marcus Bell's ignorance and arrogance would push things. Wednesday began like any other, me trying to steal a few quiet minutes to prep notes for an upcoming client call. I had my headset on, half listening to a French training webinar when I caught a flicker of movement near the corridor. A new face, red heels clicking a little too confidently, lipstick too bold for the building's gray walls. She walked like she owned the place. No badge, no hesitation, just a scan of the room and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "This is Lana," chirped someone from HR, appearing behind her with the politeness of someone trying to wrap a bomb in gift paper. "She's joining us as our new SEO specialist. She'll be working closely with the web team and assisting marketing." Lana gave a small wave, then dropped into the seat 2 desks down from mine. Rebecca's old desk. Poor thing left 2 weeks ago, burned out from endless campaigns and Marcus's new obsession with aggressive visibility. I'd been sad to see her go. I turned back to my work. I had a long morning ahead, translating the executive summary of our newest partnership proposal into Japanese, then preparing for the team meeting at 10. I didn't have time for introductions or awkward small talk. But Lana Lana had time for everything. She started with a loud phone call on speaker, something about dinner plans, organic reach, and how she'd finally escaped that garbage agency. Her voice tore through the office like a buzzsaw. I shot her a look, thinking maybe she'd realize she wasn't alone. She didn't. By 9 o'clock, she had begun commenting on my monitor. "You don't use Grammarly, huh?" "Brave." I gave a tight smile. "I've been writing in 5 languages since before Grammarly existed." She smirked. "Right, but AI can't be that bad." I turned back to my screen. The remark didn't hurt. It just caught me off guard. I'd barely exchanged words with her, and she was already poking. Then came the kicker. At 9:32, we were filing into the small conference room for our weekly strategy sync. People were filtering in, exchanging quiet hellos, juggling notepads and coffee cups. I took my usual seat by the window. Lana came in behind me, stopped, and said just loudly enough to carry, "Oh, I guess this is the lifetime employee corner." Heads turned. A few people laughed. I didn't. I looked up, calm and level. "Good morning, Lana." She blinked, then smiled wide like we were friends, just joking. "You've probably seen so many people come and go, huh?" I wasn't going to engage. I opened my laptop, pulled up the presentation. She sat next to me. Too close. "What are you working on?" she whispered, leaning in, her perfume sharp and overpowering. I tilted my screen away. "Internal summary. It's in Japanese." "Oh," she said, stretching the word like gum. "Google Translate must adore you." I stayed silent because if I spoke, professionalism would be the first casualty. She laughed softly, leaning closer again. "Hey, don't be so serious. We're all friends here, right?" Her hand brushed my arm as she said it, fingers lingering just a second too long, too intentional. It wasn't playful, it wasn't harmless. And the room, buzzing moments ago, suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. I shifted away quickly. "Meeting starting," I said. Her smile stayed, but something in her eyes flickered. Something sharper than humor, like she was waiting for me to react, like she wanted me unsettled. And for a brief moment I realized this wasn't teasing, it was a test. But I'd sat across from executives who shouted in languages they didn't understand. I'd translated threats and apologies, brokered mergers between companies that barely trusted each other. I wasn't going to flinch now, not because of her. I turned back to my notes, heart pounding, stomach tightening, not from fear but from something worse. Recognition, because I knew this game. I just didn't know why she'd chosen me as the target. Still, the meeting was already starting badly. Marcus was late again, as usual. The rest of us sat around the glass table beneath flickering fluorescent lights, scrolling through slides on our tablets, pretending this wasn't our 6th cost optimization session in 2 weeks. I sat near the end, as always. Not invisible, but easy to miss if you weren't looking. Most people weren't. Lana strutted in just before Marcus, wearing a pencil skirt that screamed aggressive promotion track. She winked at one of the marketing guys and sat directly across from me, placing her phone face up like she expected urgent fan mail. Marcus finally walked in, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened like he wanted us to believe he was busy being brilliant. He dropped a folder on the table, didn't bother saying hello. "All right," he said. "We need to cut deeper." A murmur rippled around the table. No one met anyone's eyes. "Executive directive from above," he continued. "If we want to protect our international rollout, we've got to trim non-core roles." Non-core. It's amazing how fast your stomach drops over 2 words. Lana raised her hand casually. "I've reviewed the digital operations list. We're overlapping in a few areas. Marketing automation has already reduced localization time by 40%. With AI integrations, we've streamlined most of the language workflows." Marcus nodded like she'd just handed him the answer on a silver platter. She turned to me. I mean, no offense, Mary, but translation, in 2025, there are tools that can do it faster. We should be reallocating those funds. And there it was. She smiled as if she weren't talking about me, as if I were a faulty stapler. Marcus didn't pause. I've been thinking the same thing. Look, I don't need in-house translators anymore. Google Translate can handle it. Besides, it's not like we're translating Shakespeare. I looked at him, at Lana, at the assistant whose face had gone pale and who couldn't meet my eyes. I felt every gaze slide away from me like my grief was contagious, but I didn't move. I straightened my shoulders, closed my tablet, packed nothing. I understand, I said evenly, standing. Marcus blinked. Maybe he expected tears. Maybe he expected me to beg, to fight it. Instead, I smiled, a small, controlled smile. I wish you luck at your next meeting. He frowned, clearly puzzled. Lana smirked like she'd claimed a prize. I walked out without another word. They didn't ask where I was headed. They didn't realize who would be missing. Monday was 3 days away, and they had no idea what that meeting would turn into without me there. I didn't leave immediately. I probably should have. I still had my dignity intact and a perfectly clean exit. But as I stepped into the hallway, the weight of what had just happened landed on me, not as humiliation, but as frustration. Not at being let go, but at the ignorance behind it. So I turned back. I walked into the room where Marcus was already moving on to the next efficiency metric, and Lana was tapping on her phone like she hadn't just wiped out nearly 20 years of trust in 5 minutes. Wait, I said, my voice steady but firm. You need to understand something. Marcus glanced up, mildly irritated. Mary, I'm not just a translator, I said. I'm the liaison for our international partners. I've built direct lines of communication with our clients in Japan, Germany, Argentina, and South Korea. I'm not giving them text. I'm giving them us, context, nuance, relationships. Lana rolled her eyes. We have CRM data and language tools for that. No, you don't understand, I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. It's not about words. It's about trust. Some of these clients won't speak to anyone else. They don't sign anything without me in the room. I've spent years building those bridges. Marcus leaned back in his chair like I'd interrupted his favorite show. Mary, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're not irreplaceable. No one is. I'm not saying I'm irreplaceable, I said, my voice shaking just slightly now. I'm saying you're removing the only person who understands how these partners think, how they negotiate. They won't respond to Google Translate. They won't respond to cold emails or flashy dashboards. They'll go silent, and you won't even notice it happening. Lana let out a short laugh. Wow. Confident, aren't we? Marcus nodded, almost patronizing. You're clearly emotionally attached to your role, but this isn't personal. It's just business. You may be overestimating your importance, Mary. Overestimating. That word hit harder than I expected, as if the years I spent working late nights, learning cultural idioms, perfecting honorifics, and refining contract language until every clause was airtight meant nothing. As if I were just a sentimental employee clinging to an obsolete role. They saw me as a line item, and now they were deleting the line. I stood there, heart pounding, wanting to scream the truth into their blind, self-satisfied faces. But I didn't, because something else clicked in that moment. You can't explain fluency to people who only speak in buzzwords. So I nodded once and walked out. They had no idea what they'd just discarded, but they would soon enough. The first few hours were the hardest. I walked home slower than usual, my bag feeling strangely weightless, like even it knew I no longer belonged to something. The sun was still up, but everything looked flat, washed out, like someone had drained the color from the world. When I finally stepped inside, the silence of my apartment hit me like a slap. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and just stood there. No buzzing work phone, no emails, no calendar alerts reminding me of partner follow-ups. Just stillness. I sat on the couch and stared out the window, arms wrapped tightly around myself like I was trying to hold all those years together. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to call them, Marcus, Lana, HR, anyone, to explain one more time, to make them understand that I wasn't just a cog in the machine. But the truth was, a louder part of me didn't want to give them that satisfaction. So I sat there and wondered, could they really function without me? Could Marcus, with his copy-paste confidence and buzzword bingo, navigate the subtle power plays of our South Korean suppliers? Could Lana explain the delicate honor culture our Tokyo partners insisted on preserving in every line of a contract? Could Google Translate warn them when a single misplaced pronoun could quietly kill $1 million deal? Could a machine read the pause before a sentence, the unspoken tension in a video call, the buried meaning in a single I already knew the answer. But the waiting, that was the hardest part. That night, I barely slept. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, dark except for the occasional spam notification. I didn't expect them to call, but I was waiting anyway, because the next morning was Monday, and Emily, my friend, my closest confidant in the department, would be in the room. She wasn't just a coworker. She'd been there for my first promotion, my worst flu, and the day I cried in the break room because a client called me his voice in a thank you letter. If anyone understood, it was Emily. She texted at 9:04 a.m. "He's here. Trident team walked in 2 minutes ago." Then silence. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at the screen, the blue chat bubble glowing like a lighthouse in the fog. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still nothing. Then at 9:47 a.m., another message. "Something's wrong." My heart jumped. "What happened?" I typed back instantly. No interpreter. They assumed someone else could handle it. "Thomas Delqua isn't speaking, just sitting there. Alice looks furious." I gripped the phone tighter. Of course. Of course they thought someone could simply step in. Another bubble appeared. Marcus tried using an app. I kid you not. Alice didn't even translate that. She just stared at him. My lips parted in disbelief. Or maybe awe. I couldn't tell. Then came the final message. "Thomas hasn't signed anything." Said 4 words through Alice. "We will not stay long." I leaned back on the couch, phone resting in my lap. I exhaled for the first time. They were learning. They were learning the one thing I never needed to explain. You can't remove the voice and still expect the room to understand you. Tuesday morning felt like waiting for a storm that never arrived. I stayed in bed longer than usual, scrolling through the news, my inbox, LinkedIn, anything that might tell me how the meeting had ended. Part of me wanted chaos. Another part wanted the silence to mean regret. I even pictured Marcus sweating through his overpriced shirt, stumbling through an apology to Thomas Delqua. But by noon, nothing. No headlines, no viral posts, no frantic emails asking me to come back. Just quiet. That afternoon, my phone finally buzzed. "Emily, can I call you?" Seconds later, we were connected. I didn't even say hello. "Just what happened?" She sighed. "Everything went fine." Silence. "Fine?" I echoed, trying not to let the disappointment show. "I mean, not at first," she said quickly. "When the Trident team arrived, Thomas looked around for you. He even asked Alice. Made it pretty clear. 'Where's Mary?' I closed my eyes. Of course he did. And I asked. "Lana stepped in," Emily said, her tone making it clear she wasn't impressed. "She told them you'd moved on. Said we had new tools in place. She mentioned a translation software demo she'd seen online, claimed it was just as effective. I could see it so clearly. The rehearsed smile, The calculated tilt of her head, the way she probably said just as effective like it was backed by years of data instead of a tech blog headline. Then what? I asked, my voice barely there. Thomas looked at Alice. Emily continued. For a moment I thought they were going to walk, but they didn't. Alice nodded once, and they stayed. I didn't speak. They signed, Mary. Full renewal, even the expansion clause. It's done. Something inside me collapsed. Not because I wanted the company to fail without me, but because a small foolish part of me had hoped I mattered more than a click and translate button. Emily must have heard the shift in my breathing. They only signed because Alice stepped in, she added softly. She did most of the talking. She guided everything. I think she was smoothing it over, saving face. It wasn't a victory. It was survival. But it didn't matter anymore. Not to Marcus, not to Lana. All they would see were signatures on a contract and a reason to move forward. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly. Are you okay? Emily asked. I will be. But the truth was, I wasn't. Because even if they'd managed to scrape by in one meeting, I knew what they didn't. They were building a future on a fault line, and when it fractured, when trust wore thin, when nuance vanished, when the tools failed to read a breath taken the wrong way, there would be no one left to interpret what had gone wrong. It began with a single phone call, then another, then 20 emails. By 7:13 a.m. on Wednesday, I was already staring at my phone, the screen pulsing with alerts like it had a heartbeat of its own. Emily's name flashed across the top. I hadn't even reached the kitchen yet. I answered instantly. Everything's falling apart, she said. No greeting, no lead-in. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone. What happened? There was a sharp intake of breath. The contract. The Trident deal. It's wrong. Wrong how? They signed the version Lana prepared, she said, her voice tight. The one run through auto-translate, the Japanese version. It wasn't accurate. I was fully awake now. Not accurate how? What's the clause issue? Multiple, she said. Profit-sharing terms were misstated. Oversight conditions were swapped. A couple of the limits on operational control were flipped, literally reversed in structure. The translation stripped out the soft conditional language and replaced it with direct affirmatives. I blinked. So the document says, Trident has full decision-making control now. Yes. And a 3% performance bonus backdated to last quarter. I felt cold all over. That clause was never approved. I know. Emily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. They own us, Mary. For the next fiscal year, they can revise scope, timelines, even staffing. And it's legal. They signed it yesterday, and it's already been countersigned by the Trident team. They handed it to Alice after the meeting. I sat there stunned. All the restraint I'd swallowed, all the things I hadn't said, and now this. What are they doing about it? I finally asked. Marcus is panicking. HR locked down the project folders. Legal is tearing through both language versions. Lana's saying she only used the tools she was instructed to. And the CEO, he's trying to reach Trident. Good luck with that, I muttered. Yeah, he's already sent 2 meeting requests to their liaison team, she said. No response. He even tried calling Alice directly. Her assistant said she was unavailable until further notice. My hand trembled slightly as I lowered the phone, pressing it to my cheek. And then, Emily added after a pause, they asked for you. I froze. What? Trident, one of their directors. They asked if Mary Cooper would be attending the follow-up negotiation. I didn't say a word. Emily exhaled. And Lana told them you'd been let go. Silence on the line. Do you know what they said after that? She continued. Nothing. They just nodded. Politely, quietly. But the temperature in the room shifted, like someone had slammed a door no one could see. I pictured it. Trident's executive team seated across the long glass table, faces calm, but unreadable. The kind of silence that doesn't come from confusion. The kind that comes from disappointment. From a decision. Already made. "They're not angry, Mary," she said more softly. "They're insulted." Of course they were. You don't build a relationship through a screen. You don't earn trust through a software interface. You don't replace 2 decades of cultural nuance with an API. "They're giving us a chance to fix it," Emily said, "but they haven't committed to anything. They haven't agreed to renegotiate. They haven't even promised another meeting." "And Marcus wants a miracle," she added flatly. "He's trying to push through a revised contract draft. He's calling in a certified interpreter to mediate a video call tomorrow. But between us, the partners have already gone quiet." That silence. I knew that silence. It wasn't a delay. It was a verdict. "They'll cancel," I said softly. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." Quietly. No headlines. Just gone. Emily didn't argue. "I think so too." There was a long pause between us. And in that pause, I realized something else. Something Marcus still hadn't grasped. They didn't lose the deal because of the contract. They lost it because of what the contract represented. They told our partners I wasn't necessary, that their voice, their culture, their expectations were just a line item. Trident didn't walk away because of the money. They walked away because no one listened. And when they finally do, no one will understand what they're saying. By Thursday morning, there was no more pretending. The air around the company had changed. Brittle, quiet, like the moment just before glass shatters. Emily texted me at 8:03 a.m., short and breathless. "It's over." My chest tightened. "What's over?" I replied, already knowing the answer. She called instead of texting. "They're pulling out," she said, not even waiting for me to say hello. "Trident, the Japanese deal is dead." I tightened my grip on the edge of the kitchen counter. "What happened?" Emily's voice was trembling now. "They sent a formal notice this morning through legal. It's brutal. Professional, but brutal. Read it to me." She cleared her throat, then spoke slowly, like she was reciting something carved in stone. "After internal review and consultation with our board, we regret to inform you that Triton Group is terminating all pending collaboration with Grayson Manufacturing, effective immediately. This decision is based on what we deem an unprofessional handling of critical documentation, a lack of cultural respect, and a negligent attitude toward communication protocol during the negotiation process." I closed my eyes, but she wasn't done. "The recent substitution of professional translation with automated tools during legal finalization without our consultation demonstrated a disregard for precision, transparency, and mutual respect. We can no longer proceed with a partner unwilling to prioritize diligence and integrity." Silence settled between us. Then quietly, Emily added, "They named her." I looked up. "Lana." "Yeah," she whispered. "They specifically mentioned her in an internal memo," said the SEO specialist, quote, "displayed a dismissive attitude, lacked the qualifications to facilitate intercultural exchange, and failed to recognize the severity of her role." I released a slow breath. And Marcus, he's in with the board, has been for hours. Legal says the company could lose up to $12 million in projected revenue and expansion credits. It's not just the Trident contract. Other clients are watching. Some of them were tied to that deal. Of course they were, because Trident wasn't just a client. They were a signal. When you lose their trust, the whole network starts to flicker. This could collapse an entire quarter's forecast. Emily said the CFO is panicking. PR is drafting a holding statement. And Lana, she's disappeared from the floor. I didn't feel victorious, not even satisfied. What I felt was colder. They didn't just lose a deal, they lost face. In Japan, that's not just bad business, it's unforgivable. They reduced a relationship years in the making to a botched PDF and a handful of empty buzzwords. They dismissed my work, my insight, my presence, like it was optional, and now they were paying for it. But here's the cruelest part. I still could have saved them if they'd just listened. It was 2:41 p.m. when my phone rang. I was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket with a notebook I hadn't opened in months. I'd been jotting ideas, freelance plans, maybe even the start of something new. I didn't recognize the number, but something about the timing made me answer. Mary Cooper. The voice was tight, polite, carefully practiced. Yes, this is Jordan from Grayson's executive office. I'm calling on behalf of the leadership team. They've asked me to reach out to you directly. I let the silence stretch. I believe you've heard what happened, he added. I have. There was a long pause, then a breath. We'd like to formally invite you to return in your previous capacity, or potentially a higher role, depending on your interest. The company deeply regrets the recent oversight and, on behalf of Mr. Bell and the executive committee, we want to apologize. I blinked slowly. Oversight? Well, we acknowledge that the decision to terminate your role was made hastily and that reliance on automated systems was misguided. Misguided. That word. So soft. So sanitized. And what about Lana? I asked evenly. There was a tight pause. Miss Fallon is no longer handling international accounts. Disciplinary action is under review. I didn't react. That's not what I asked. Another pause. What would you require to return? I stood, walked to the window, and stared at the city blinking beneath the gray clouds. I want a formal apology, I said. From her. Not a press release, not a line in a memo. I want her to say it to my face, that she disrespected me, underestimated me, and that her arrogance cost the company millions. Silence. Then the voice spoke softly. And financial compensation, I said, my voice steady. Not a bonus, not a performance token. I want damages for wrongful termination and reputational harm. You fired me publicly, dismissed me like I was interchangeable, and allowed her to turn me into a punchline. You want me back? Then pay for what that did to me. He didn't respond for several long seconds. We'll need to speak with legal, he said carefully. You do that. May I ask one thing? Sure. Would you consider returning if those conditions are met? I paused just long enough for the weight of my silence to land. If you can't understand why I deserve both, you never deserved me in the first place. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I went back to my notebook. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be acknowledged. I was defining my own worth. Period. Friday morning, the company pulled out all the stops. I hadn't planned to go in, but they asked, insisted, and something in me wanted to meet their eyes one last time. I wore black, not for drama, but for clarity. No color, no softness, just truth. When I stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the entire office was assembled. A few heads turned. Others pretended to be casual, like they hadn't spent the last week watching their walls collapse. Marcus stood off to the side, face pale, hands clasped. The CFO was there too, arms folded, lips tight. But it was Lana who stepped forward. She looked drained. The confidence was gone. She clutched a stack of papers like a shield. Her blazer was a little too crisp, like borrowed confidence, and in that moment, I saw it. She wasn't powerful. She was protected. And now that protection was gone. Mary, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I owe you a very public apology. The room went dead silent. I spoke out of turn, she said. I undermined your work. I dismissed your expertise. And I said things, deeply disrespectful things, that came from ignorance and arrogance. I was wrong. Her voice cracked. I believed tools could replace people. That speed mattered more than understanding, and because of that, I cost this company a partnership we spent a decade building. She looked up. You were the bridge. I burned it. I'm sorry. A few murmurs moved through the room. Someone actually nodded. Marcus shifted like he wanted to speak, but I raised my hand. I met Lana's eyes. Thank you, I said. It takes something to say that out loud. She nodded, cautiously hopeful. But I'm not coming back. Silence. The room tightened. I don't owe this company another minute of my life, I continued, my voice calm. When I was here, I was invisible until I wasn't. You saw my value only after you lost it, and now you want to repair your reputation using me. I turned slightly so everyone could hear. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a recovery plan. I'm a professional who deserved respect before it cost you millions. I paused. And just so you know, I've accepted another offer. Lana blinked. Marcus straightened. The Japanese partners? He asked. I smiled, small and certain. They called. Me, the day after they pulled out. Said they wanted to work with someone who understood not just their language but their values. I'll be overseeing their North American expansion. A gasp rippled through the room, a pen clattered to the floor. Lana's lips parted slightly. I didn't walk away from this company, I added. I walked toward something better. Then I left. No applause, no banners, no dramatic soundtrack, just the sound of heels on tile, doors closing behind me, and a freedom I had earned. Word by word, hand by hand. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of my new office, city lights stretching endlessly. This time, I wasn't the translator. I was the voice, and they would never forget it. Life has a strange way of teaching you who you really are, usually right after someone tries to erase you. And when I walked out of Grayson for the final time, I didn't look back. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to. I had already lived my proof. Every word I'd interpreted, every hand I'd shaken, every bridge I'd built, none of it required their validation anymore. Trident didn't just offer me a job, they offered me purpose. They named me Director of Global Cultural Strategy, which is a polished way of saying, we trust your voice, and we want to amplify it. The first time I sat in a meeting with their Tokyo office as an equal, not an assistant, not an afterthought, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not revenge, just calm. Like I had finally arrived where I was meant to be. I didn't just receive a new title. I built a team. I hired overlooked voices, language specialists, cultural advisors, women who'd been told they were too niche or too soft-spoken. Together, we shaped a space where fluency wasn't just about words. It was about respect. Sometimes, people from Grayson reach out quietly, carefully. A few even apologized. Some were simply curious. Do you miss it? Not even a pause. Not at all. Because here's the truth. Losing that job didn't break me. It showed me how strong I'd become without anyone noticing. It reminded me that your worth isn't something someone else can calculate on a spreadsheet or reduce to a line item. Your worth lives in what remains when you're gone. And when I left, I didn't leave silence. I left a message. Respect people before you need them. Ask questions before you assume. And never, ever confuse technology with trust. I still keep the small ceramic cup Thomas gave me, tucked safely on my new desk. Not as a reminder of where I came from, but as a symbol of what happens when you choose to honor the language of people, not just profit. And every time someone new joins our team, I tell them the same thing. You're not here to be a cog. You're here to be a voice. And I mean it, because that's the legacy I'm building now. One fluent, fearless step at a time.